Check one, two, three. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. Okay, my guest today is based out of Mumbai, India. He's a production sound mixer, sound designer, and re-recording mixer working in Bollywood. Please welcome Aditya Yadav.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Now, Aditya, we always start the show by asking, when you're mixing on set, what's in your audio kit? So tell us about your mics, your mixer, power distribution, and everything in between.
Sure. So my main recorder, which I use primarily, is the Sound Devices 688. And along with that, I have a 702T, which is my secondary recorder. I use that mainly, the intention of using that recorder is to record room tones, ambiances, and it's usually handled by my assistant. So in case I want a room tone, which is not set in the same room, but if I want a different perspective, then I feel that it's just better to have like a separate bag, which my assistant can just take and move to another location while the take is going on. Yeah, that's what I use it for. Or maybe if the scene is kind of set in a restaurant or in a mall or in a crowded place, I would usually have my assistant with this bag set up and try to make him a part of that crowd, and so that I get a much clear, a perspective of the same sound. And these two recorders are then synced together by using the Tentacle Sync. Both the recorders and the cameras are in sync at all times. And I can record those tracks keeping the post-production aspect in mind. In case if I am going to be the post-supervisor on those films, then I always have a log of those sounds which I've recorded separately. If I don't have a room tone, or if I don't have any spacing in between two dialogues, which I can't use as room tone, this other track always proves helpful. For microphones, the 416 is my weapon of choice. I use it extensively. I've used it for recording dialogues, for recording ADR, for recording sound effects, Foley. I use it everywhere. But besides that, the Neuman KMR82 and the MKH50 are the other two microphones I always keep handy. The 82, I use it mainly for wide angle shots, where I'm not able to get my 416 or the MKH50 close. That mic has proved really helpful. In regards to the lavs, I use the COS 11s with Lectrosonics, and sometimes, depending on the budget of the show, the G3s are also my go-to mics. For power distribution, I use the remote audio BDS. I power my recorder and the receiver through that via the NP1. In regards to my bag, I have an Orca OR32, it is, I think, for the 688. Yeah, and I also have the Roland R88, which I used to use extensively in the past, but then given the size of that recorder, it's huge, it's very bulky. I've started using it less and less, but for that, I have a petrol bag. And for the 702T, I have a custom-made bag, which I got it made from a local bag maker in Bombay. So I think that sums up my setup, which I normally have with me. I always carry the 702T with me at all times. So it's always there. It's always a backup recorder. And I always make sure that I have those additional ambiances or room tones with me.
Now you also do you do post work as well. So when you're working on set and then post, how often do you get to do work on the post audio of something that you've actually recorded on location?
It doesn't happen frequently, but whenever I get a job or an inquiry comes my way for doing the production audio, I always push myself or try to convince them to give me the post-production work as well. I try to convince the production from a point of view of how, it's always like when I'm working on both the aspects of sound for the film, I feel I have an overall control over it, which also helps me take decisions on set, which I know will help me in post production. So there might be times when there is Russell on the labs, and usually, I would go for another take. But if I know that I'm going to do the post for it, I always keep in mind, oh, okay, this could be taken out, or okay, this is really bad, I have to re-record this. So those kind of decisions, then in regards to recording some specific sound effects, if I'm going to be the sound designer of the film, I always make sure that I have read the script thoroughly. I know what is going on and what may be happening after this or after that. So I record those instances. So it helps me that way, where I get to make certain decisions. So far, I've worked on, I think, 4 or 5 films that way, which I was a production sound mixer and the sound supervisor as well, and a couple of ads here and there. So that proved very helpful for me.
I think a lot of times too, like, yeah, when you're there and you're like, okay, I know what the script is. I know, okay, this vehicle just drove up. Let me get some audio of the vehicle just driving up, and able to pull a lot of those sounds from set versus trying to do it, later, whether from a sound library or recreating it. So I think that always works wonderful.
Yeah, and most of the times what happens is you have a conversation between two characters, and they're like on the side of a street. And normally what we try to do is we try to have a sound lockup, wherein we have these bodyguards, especially the people who are called especially to make sure that there is a lockup on set, and that people are not allowed to get in that particular perimeter, of the shoot. And they are called sound security. So we usually call them, if you're doing production sound, I usually give them a request to make sure that those guys are arranged for. But every once in a while, there is always a car or a motorcycle which goes by. And most of the times it so happens that we have to go for a retake because the audio is spoiled. But sometimes what happens is you take, you consider the location and how it is, where the scene is set, not where our shoot is going on, but where the scene is set. If it is set close to a road, it's okay to have a bike going by from once in a while, even if it's on top of the dialogue, and if it's seen on camera, that's fine, because you eventually end up incorporating that in the film. So those are the kind of decisions if it's a car which is just honking, or a motorcycle which is honking, then yes, of course I'll go for another take. But if it's just a car by or a motorcycle by, I'll just usually leave it there.
Okay. Now, living in Vancouver, how does production, say, here on this side of the world versus in Bollywood? Is there a big difference in the way production is handled on set?
Yes, there is. And mainly from a point of view of not the crew or that you're working with, but I think given the location, because films in India is such a big thing that then even if it's just a news reporter who is interviewing a person on street, there'll be a huge crowd that'll just gather to see what is going on. Because of that, it's just like everyone is so much motivated by films. People in India love films, and that's why they see a camera out in public, they make sure that, oh, like people who are just there they'll stop and see what's going on, and they'll start clicking photos and all of that. And even if it's a busy day and people are going to work, they'll stop and they'll see what's going on, and that creates a lot of problems. That I think is the main issue. And with the thing of working in Vancouver is people don't care actually. If they're filming but on the side of the road, they just they mind their own business, they just go. But in India, it's the other way around. It doesn't work that way. One small example I'd like to give you is there was this feature film which had worked in 2015 called Sairat. It's a regional film, and this was that director's second film. It was set in some remote village in India, in my state. And me and my partner, we were we read the script, we were in the pre-production stage, and we knew that village where they were filming it. And I think the crowd was the least of our worries. We're like, oh, we are in a village. There are not going to be there's not going to be a lot of people there. But we went on set on the first day. Now, this is this director's second film. The first film which he had made was a blockbuster. Like it was huge. And the first day of set, we go there, close to around 200 or 300 people were there just to see him.
Mm.
Not even the actors, the director. And and that was such a problem. And we did not take that into consideration at all. We didn't end up using much of production audio on that first day. And from the second day, we had to make sure that these people need to be controlled. And then further on, like those arrangements were made where we kept the crowd away from the set. Like, people were very careful about speaking on set in regards to, like, because the locals would always show up and they would somehow get an idea about, oh, so tomorrow they're going to shoot at this location. And like a whole bunch of people used to reach there before even we reached there, and everyone was like, how did they come to know about this? So that was that's always a problem. Like crowd, I think, is the main problem
Oh, that's interesting.
because there's so many of us.
That's true. The actual, I guess, the dynamic on set, is there a lot of separation between each department? So the camera department, do you communicate well with the camera department, or, some sets it's very compartmentalized and it's like you don't talk with this group and they don't talk and these people are the only people that handle C stands and these, is it like that, or is it a little more flexible?
It's actually, it depends. It depends on the recordist. I feel the mixer, whoever is a mixer or the boom operator, it's really up to you, because you could choose to go and speak to these people. You could choose to go and be friendly with them. But we as sound recordists or sound mixers, we are known to be like, these group of people who love to be aloof. Like, we'll be all by ourselves. We'll make sure that we are not being an interruption to other departments. But I feel that's one mistake which a lot of people do, and which is something which a lot of people need to work on. And I make sure that before the shoot starts, I introduce myself, like I speak to them. Even if it's in between takes, I would just like, try to make a connection, because the sound community and the community is small. Like, it's big, but at the same time, like if you're working with some on a big project, it's usually a small knit community, and you somehow end up knowing this person. Like the DOP is probably a friend of some other sound mixer, or he knows some other director or a gaffer or something like that. And that's how you try to make connections. And like, usually on my set, like wherever I am the sound mixer, I make sure that I go and communicate with everyone, even the talent or the producers or the utility guys, the light guys, and all of them.
Okay. All right. I was watching your demo reel, so let's talk about a few of the projects you've worked on. One of them was you were a sound effects editor and a re-recording mixer for the Underwater Realm Part 2. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was actually my degree film, like my diploma film for Vancouver Film School. So I was not the original sound designer and re-recording mixer on that. That was my final project at school. So the thing which we had to do was to reach out to these other content creators and filmmakers and ask for permission, whether it's okay for us to work on their films. And I came across this period piece where it's a dogfight between two planes, and like it's set, I think, and it's set in World War II, if I'm not wrong. And I reached out to the director, and he turned out to be a nice guy. And these guys at Realm Pictures, and I think his name was David Reynolds, if I'm not wrong. And I reached out to him. He's like, okay, yeah, fine, sure, you do your thing. And what we had to do was we had to scrap out all the sounds, music, anything, and we had to redo it. So from music editing to sound design, re-recording, mixing, Foley recording. So the voiceovers which are there, like the chatter which is going on in the planes and the headquarters, it was not there in the original film. That's something which I wrote and I added, just to add that additional a cinematic or a dramatic touch to it. And I shared that trailer, that short film, with the original sound designer and the director, and they were really happy with that. And the sound designer, in fact, was like, he ended up asking me how I did certain things, and that was like, oh wow, that's nice.
Oh, yeah.
That's something different. Yeah.
Okay. All right. There's another one here. It was When the Ocean Met the Sky.
So that was a Canadian feature film that I worked on in, I think, 2014. The recommendation actually came from my sound design professor at Vancouver Film School, and He was, I think, him and his associate. He was particularly impressed with the Underwater Realm short film which I had done. So, and at that point, I was back in Mumbai, and Eric, his name is Eric Paul. He called me and he's like, "Are you free to do a project?" I was like, "Yeah, I am, but sadly, I'm back in Bombay. I don't know how it's going to work out." So he was under the impression that I am in Vancouver at that time, but I had already come back home. So we kind of set up a process in which we exchanged emails. We had a lot of Skype calls in which he, as a supervising sound editor, he gave me his notes. Okay, this is how I want certain things, and this is how I want certain things. Then there were notes from the director's side, and we kind of made a game plan. And what we would do is the film was divided into reels, and I would send him one reel, and then, like, get his response and reviews on that. Then another we used to do another round of reviews where the director used to give his notes, and that's how we completed the process where this film was worked on overseas. So I was the sound editor and the re-recording mixer in India, and the sound supervisor and the director were in Vancouver. So that was an interesting process.
Oh, that's great. Now, did you learn any tips on how to best work with people around the world or anything like that? And what's the best way to do this?
See, the main thing about working overseas when you're not in front of the person physically, I think trust is the main factor. Like, you need to make sure that you stand true to your word. Like, whatever you say you're going to deliver, you need to make sure that you do that. One such example, like one of the projects which I bagged like this was this Pakistani film. So the film was shot in Pakistan, and the director is based in Los Angeles, and he had put up a Kickstarter campaign regarding the same. And I saw the Kickstarter campaign, and I was really intrigued. Like, it was beautifully shot. They had made some there was some props which are like robotic, and I was like, okay, this has a lot of scope for using a lot of futuristic sound design. And I reached out to him. His name was Imran Khan, and he's a Pakistani who's like basically born and raised in the US. I showed my interest towards working on this project, and he was like, "How are we going to work on this? Because you are in Bombay and I'm in LA. How's that going to work?" So I tried to put forward this thing where, because a lot of sounds in Pakistan and India are kind of similar. Like, there are some Muslim communities in India which have a lot of their own markets, and like, they have their own the shops and all of those. So the sound, like the sonic quality of both those places is kind of the same, even though those two places are two different places. So what I did on that show was I recorded some original sound effects of the crowds and all, and I just sent him a few samples, and it's like, this is what this particular area sounds like. Now imagine if I use these sounds and make your film sound more real. I think it'll do it more justice, rather than using stock sound effects and, like, downloading some sound effects from the internet and getting the work done back in LA. So what you're getting by working with me is this original set of sound effects which are true to your film. I think that was enough for me to convince him, and I ended up bagging that job. And after that, I think we worked on 3 films after that. So that trust factor is the most important one. Like, you deliver what you have promised to. And he was really happy with the name of the film is The Drone and the Kid. So yeah, so that was the film, and I feel it ended up sounding good. The director was happy with it, and he gave me 2 more projects. So I'm pretty sure he was happy with what I gave him.
Yeah, that's good. I saw on your demo, I guess you had a little clip from the drone and the kid, and I really liked the sound design with the drone as he's communicating with the boy, and that was really interesting. Can you share any of the tips that you did when you were creating those effects?
So for the drone, the main, I think the primary character was the lens that is going back and forth. So I had these point and shoot cameras, like the old ones, in which you had to put a film reel, and then you have to physically take it out and get those photos developed. So I had, I think, 4 or 5 of those. So I ended up using my handy 416 and the 702, and I recorded some of those movements using small servos, like the mixer which you use to make juice and all of that. So you take out the mixer part, the blades, you take it out, and what you have inside is a small motor, and you record those, and then it's just a manipulation. It's just the process of manipulating those and making sure that it reacts. Although, like, the story is about this guy who finds this drone which crashes in Pakistan, and he's talking to the operator who's on the other side. He's in the operating room, and what he feels, what the kid feels, is this, that this is a real person. So even though we know, we as adults, we as non filmmakers, are like, as adults, we know that this is, no, this is not a human being, but for that kid it's a human being. So we had to make sure that the drone sounds like a human, it reacts like a human to certain things that the kid does. And I think that was interesting because, following what principal Ben Burt followed for Wally, and like for R2D2, like every sound had an emotion connected to it. So that's the pattern that we followed for that film.
Oh, that's very interesting. So I guess out of all the projects that you've worked on, what has been the most favorite for you?
The most favorite for me has been this short film called Crackle. So now what makes it special is because it's probably the first virtual reality film made in India, which is a narrative. So it's a horror short film. And going on set, I had no idea what to expect. And one thing which I knew that the one thing which is going to be there, that was this 15 to 16 camera setup for VR, which they were using. And so booming was out of the question. What I did not take into consideration was the fact that I would have to hide myself. I was like, usually when you go out on set, hiding the mic is your main issue. But on this set, like, what the main issue was, like, where will I hide myself? Because I think besides the actors, I was the person who was closest to the camera. That was one setup on which I just had my receivers. I did not have any shark fins or anything which would give me a signal boost. So I had to make it clear to the director that, oh, this is the problem, and we have to deal with this. And the only way for you to deal with this is to make sure that I am hidden behind certain props and all. So luckily for us, only one scene from that film was set in the interiors. The rest of it was shot in the woods. So it was easy for me to just like hide behind one of the woods, or if they were in a clearing, they had to make a prop or something which they could incorporate in the film for me to hide behind. So that's what made it interesting. It was funny, and there were a lot of issues in regards to, because you could not use timecode on that. So those people were just at the mercy of the slate for them to sync the audio. But in the end, it went well. I didn't get a chance to see the final film yet, but I had a word with the director, and he said, "Oh, you're safe. You're not seen anywhere." So I was like, "Okay." Then my job as a sound mixer was done on that.
So, and what is the name of it again, just so we can look for it?
It's called Crackle.
Crackle?
It's there on my Crackle, yeah.
Okay. Is there sound support services in Mumbai?
Normally, if we do run into like some issue with the equipment, usually getting in touch with the manufacturer is the best way to go about it. There are, of course, some local electricians who work on it, but normally I would not, like, I don't go into that zone where I just hand over my receiver or a microphone to them. But in regards to microphones, Sennheiser has their office in India as well. So to get my mics serviced or all of those things, I always send it to Sennheiser and not to some third party electrician or tech support. That's one downside to it, because getting in touch with the manufacturers, it does take a lot of time. And I personally haven't had a problem wherein I had to get in touch with sound devices for any of my equipment. But I've had friends and other sound mixers who have run into this problem where the recorder just conked off, and they had to literally wait for a very long time for it to reach sound devices and for them to work on it, and then for them to send it back. So that becomes a very time consuming thing. Of course, like I said, there are some local electricians and people who work on that, but I would not really trust them. It's an expensive piece of gear. So, I mean, I'd rather trust the manufacturer than someone else.
So no rental houses in town or anything like that where you can just go and rent a new one? And
there are a lot of rental houses. But again, it all depends on your comfort with that person, because I've had rental places in the past where the equipment is not good. It's like not good from a standpoint of like even the working, and also like the way the mics are kept. Like, it's dirty. Whoever used a lav mic before you, it's still sticky. They don't clean it, so you have to be very careful about who you go to. There are many in Bombay because films are like, it's a big industry in the city. And of course there are a lot of people, but you have to be, I think I have had my share of working with bad rental houses, but the current one who I always go to is like finally someone who I found after going through all of those bad phases. And now I know that this person who I rent my equipment from is a good guy, first of all. Secondly, his equipment is well kept, it's clean, and it works well. And if I could give him a requirement of, say, if I want 5 lav mics, he'll always give me 7 or 8 just for safety. He'll always give me a couple extra. So, but again, that's the kind of relationship that you build with people over time. Because I make sure he knows that whenever I have a gig coming up and if I need to rent something out, I'll always go to him. So he reciprocates in the same way. So that's how it is.
Okay. All right. So now it's time to talk about your worst on-set experience.
The worst onset experience has to be on this shoot for this ad film, which I did a couple of years back. And it was an ad for a local nationalized bank. It was an all-day shoot. It was a one-day shoot. And in that one day, they had to cram up like 3 different ads for the same bank. And it was a run and gun setup. I was the only sound mixer. I was the boom operator. It was a one-man job which I was doing. The shoot, I remember, was on a Sunday because we were filming inside the bank, and it was the quietest place, like, probably the quietest I've recorded in. And I was happy. I was super happy that there's no sound. It's on like probably the 10th or 15th floor of that building, and there is like the traffic sounds were out of the recordings. So I had I didn't have to worry about those. And the entire film, like all 3 films, there was no static shot. Everything was on a steady cam. So the people moving around, the characters moving from one counter to another, the characters going inside an elevator. So there was a lot of moving around. One of the things that the production had to do was to wrap up all of those 3 films in that given period of time, because they were like, we can't afford to go overtime because we have to get this thing done today. And so that's why we are constantly filming. There were no breaks. We had a running lunch, so where if one of your other person in your department is working, you have lunch or dinner till then, or you have snacks till then, and then you finish, you go and take his place, and you come back. That's how it was going. This was towards the end of the shoot, where like finally everyone was like, okay, we need to take a break. So the agency guys, the producer, director, they went down for a smoke, and we were just having dinner. And we started talking, and the agency guy, he comes up to me and he's like, hey, that's a very elaborate setup that you have. Like, I saw that you have placed another mic over here, and then you're putting a lab on the other artist as well. Why are you doing that? I was like, I was confused. I was like, what do you mean why I'm doing that? We're going to use all of that audio. And the agency guy was like, no, but this is noisy audio. So I was like, no, it's not noisy. I'm monitoring that. Like, if you want to listen to it, you can listen to it. I was like, no, there's no way we're going to end up using this audio. So he called in a meeting with the producer and the director right in front of me. And I'm panicking. I was like, what went wrong? And he speaks to the director about this. And he's like, the sound recordist is saying that we are going to use this dirty audio. And the director was like, no, I'm monitoring as well. The audio is very clean. We are going to use this audio. So like, no, that can't happen. This is an ad film. We cannot use production audio in this. So I let them be. I was like, let me just step out, let them have a conversation about whatever it is they're speaking. And then the director comes back to me and he's like, sorry, Adi, we can't use this audio because the agency guy is stressing on dubbing the entire thing. We are going to loop the entire thing. And I won't say that he's wrong, because the normal practice in India and how it works, and for most of the films as well, is the director or the producer, they make a choice of just like recording the mix track on the camera, and then they use that track as a guide track to dub the entire film. And they dub each and every one of the characters, be it the background artist or the secondary artist, everyone gets dubbed. The director comes up to me and he's like, yeah, they want to dub the whole thing. But I was like, this is a very clean audio. Like, the files are really clean. Like, probably the cleanest I've recorded ever. And you need to use this. So, like, they want more bass in the artist's voice. And I was like, but they're not doing a voiceover. They are performing. They are acting. I was like, yeah, but that's how it's going to be. And I was like, okay, there's not much I can do to that. Whatever the remaining shoot was, I just left the lapels on and I was sitting on a chair. I made sure that I was comfortable for the rest of the shoot because they are anyway going to use the guide track. So that has to be the worst one ever, because the amount of exhaustion that I had gone through after the end of that 14, 15-hour long shoot, I was just tired, and it's like it was completely not worth it. And but there's nothing much you can do in those situations, I think.
That's interesting. So you say it's very common. So it is just a guide track, what you're recording on location, and primarily a lot of times they'll loop everything.
Yeah. But this is the case 80% of the times, because in the recent past, that practice has started to change, where more and more people and more directors are like, no, we like this production audio track more. We want to keep this. And the fact that we can do it, why not use it? But then, given the fact that India is a noisy place, even if the director wants it, even if there is sound security, even if there is a lockup, like, where you block the entire area, your track may eventually end up being noisy. And in those situations, it comes to a point where it's the director usually is the one who makes the choice. Most of the times, the director will be like, you know what, I like the performance. It's okay if the audio file is not sounding great, but I like the performance more. I don't want to call the artist back and loop them. So that's the thing. Gladly, like, as the time is going by, that attitude towards production audio is changing slowly and steadily. Yeah, we as sound mixers, we have to make sure that that discipline is followed on set, and that if there is a sound which is not a part of this film, or if it's something like, that is coming in between the scene, then we just call cut. It's up to the sound mixer.
Yeah, I was on a recent commercial shoot and it was very noisy in the background. And we went ahead and had them, the actor do his lines, but then we went to a quiet area and I had him redo his lines separately. And so we kind of did our ADR, and luckily the cadence and his delivery was very similar. And so it matched up pretty good. And we just had to do some minor adjustments, but we don't always have that chance to do that. So.
Plus, also, it makes sense for you to record it at that particular moment, because I feel like when an actor acts, he's in his character on that day, as opposed to calling him like probably 4 months later to loop. He's probably doing some other project and he's completely out of that. Yeah, I also make it a point where if it's constantly being noisy, then I make sure that if I find a quiet moment during the day, I'll just call the actor. I'll record his wild line.
Now, have you ever forgotten any equipment when you were going to an audio project?
My headphones, but that just happened once, and I think that was the first and the last time I ever forgot anything. But yeah, that was the most stupidest thing probably I may have done. And I ended up using iPhone headphones on the set, or initially, like, for the initial bit of the shoot. And because the shoot was in the same city, what I had to do was I had to send someone to get the headphones back from the rental place, and then I had went on with my shoot for the rest of the day. But yeah, headphones has to be that one thing which I've forgotten.
I've done that one time too. Well, what kind of expendables do you like to use on set when you're miking up actors?
So one of the main things which I always use are the vampire clips. Vampire clips are definitely the one thing which I use a lot. I know people who have used them and they're like, oh, they don't really work, but I think they've worked really well for me in the past, and I still continue to use them. And there's this company called, I think, LMC Sound, if I'm not wrong. They have those vampire clips for the COS 11s and the G3s. So those have worked pretty well. But one bad thing about the vampire clips is that the pins on them, they break really easily. And usually, like, although I don't let that happen a lot on set, but it's sometimes once in a while you'll have an actor who'll just pull the mic off without even realizing that they have, like, it's clipped on, because they usually are, they have a habit of, like, having the mic put on them with the use of some tape. That's why it's easy for them to just rip it off, and they just forget that there are actually two pins which are, like, going inside your t-shirt or shirt or whatever you're wearing. So those break easily. But the other thing which I use are those rubber pads. I don't know which company it is, but we get a lot of them made locally. So those are some things which the equipment rental guys will have in ample. Like, they'll just have a box full of just those rubber pads. I use them when I don't have the vampire clips. So that's one thing which I use. The other things which I am meaning to buy in the near future are the hider mic, the lav clips which they have for the ties, and I think the one which they have for a bra. I think I'm not too sure that, and the Viviana straps, because again, given the fact that how some of the rental places work in India, a lot of the things are made, like, handmade. So they'll have a strap which will go around your feet, like, which is a normal Velcro which they use. I've had actors complain in the past that, that thing, it pokes, like, it's really uncomfortable, and sometimes the actors may even end up having a rash or something if it's a long shoot, and if that actor is constantly there on all the days. So that is one complaint which I had, and so that is one purchase which I'm going to make in the near future. The other thing which I have is a sound bullet by these people called Sound Guys. So that proves really helpful for miking up females, especially. Yeah, so I use that a lot. I don't have the latest one which they have. I think they have changed the shape of that bullet into a microphone. I don't have that, but I think I have the older one which I use constantly.
When you discuss daily rates for sound people, is there a range that you can kind of talk about? Like, what could somebody expect as a daily rate working, in the sound department on a production?
That's actually very debatable, because I have had freshers, like, people who are just starting out, and people who are professionals. They have, like, people, professionals, by that I mean people who've been working in the industry for a long time. There have been gigs for which, like, they have charged the same rate. That usually is a problem over here, which I personally face, is, like, the habit of giving package deals. Package deals meaning, what, I'll quote you one cost, and in that I'll do the production and the post production audio for you. So what that in turn does is it breaks the market. Like, that thing where, like, there is no way for you to quote anything other than that, even though that's like the not the majority of it. But yeah, these practices do exist over here. But I think the other way for you to make money in India doing production audio is, it's only possible if you own your own equipment. Because on a feature film set, you will have a very big requirement, like an 8 channel or a 12 channel recorder, and like 10 lapels and 3 booms and all of that. And if you go out to rent out those, you will end up earning nothing, like, close to nothing, and the majority of it will go to the rental house. So that is one thing which I took that into consideration, luckily, very early on, and I made sure that I have a lot of my equipment is my own equipment. That sadly is the truth over here, and that's how it works. Usually people who are well established, like, some of the people who are doing, like, the A listed jobs, like the big blockbuster films, they are in a, I would consider them to be in a position to charge a higher rate, as opposed to someone who is just starting off. I've been doing this for the past 6 years. Like, I've been doing production audio for the past 6 years, and I still consider myself nowhere close to what these other big sound mixers are doing. So that gap will always be there. But then for you to get into the A leagues, you do have to go through these, like, where you pick up a job for whatever rate they give you, because for a fact, like, if you say no to this, there's some other guy who's just next in line standing behind you. So sadly, it comes to that. Right now, I'm luckily in a place where I can make those decisions, that, oh, if this is the rate which I want, and they start to negotiate. No, but this is the rate we have. And it's like, but, or that other guy is charging us this, and I just tell them, then just go to that other guy. Don't waste my time. Say, for example, 1688. 8 microphones, 8 labels, one 416, one CMIT 5, MKH 50, and an operator should cost you somewhere in the range of, say, around 15 to 18,000 rupees, which should be roughly around $250.
Okay. That's a nice package for that price.
Yeah, but then what package they would have, like the overall cost for them would be like, okay, we can only give you 25,000 per day. So what's left with me is the remaining $100, $100. Like, so that's nothing for me as a sound mixer. So it makes sense for you to have your own equipment in this situations. Maybe if you just like rent out some labels, that would make sense, because that's not much, because most of the cost which goes into this are is a recorder and the boom mics. So that's the thing. That's the sad truth. But yeah, it exists. And the way the graph has gone is it's gone down considerably as we are moving ahead in the years. Like the rates are going down. And because I know people who talk, like, who've been working in the industry for the past 20, 25 years, and the rates which they have charged, and you listen to them today, they're like, it's impossible for you to get these rates. But then they're like, we got these rates at one point. So sadly, it exists.
Okay. You had mentioned you'd kind of started a website called SyncinPost. Tell me a little bit about that.
So SyncinPost is just another initiative which I'm trying to start in regards to some of the audio work which I'm doing. And as of now, it's just fresh. Like it's literally like a few months old, I could say. And the intention behind that was to start creating video content which is audio centric. So then be it tutorials, podcasts, videos regarding sound effects recording, and some other interesting stuff. Like I've put videos of me walking inside a cave using binaural microphones in my ears. So like creating content from keeping audio as a center focus in that. Yeah, so that's something which is an ongoing thing. Yeah, hopefully I wish to pick it up in full swing in the days to come. And yeah, besides that, it's one of the other things which we have is a sound effects store. And it's still a small store, but it's there on sonus.com. It's under the name Bombay Sonic, which is again, it's a store started by me and my buddy Karthik, who is my classmate in Vancouver Film School. It's basically a bunch of sound effects which we had independently gone out and recorded with an intention of selling them, or those are the kind of sound effects which we had recorded for some other film. Now we are selling them as sound effects libraries. So that's another thing which is there.
Okay. I think I saw one that was was it a Yamaha motorcycle?
Yeah, that's actually my father's motorcycle. It's my dad got it in 1985, and it's a 175cc motorcycle. And I remember as a kid, I used to sit on the tank, on the petrol tank, and my dad used to ride me around, and it was there in the family for a very long time. And as a gift to my father, I decided to revamp it, like because it was not in a working condition, and I decided to make sure that the engine is running, that the motorcycle actually works. And that's one thing which I did. I got it remade. The one thing about that motorcycle is the sound. Like you could hear it from a mile away, and you could just tell that, oh, it's the Rajdoot that is going, or oh, it's the Royal Enfield that is going. So that was the quality of some of the sound effects, no, some of the sounds of these motorcycles. Especially me, I was very attached to that motorcycle, because as a kid, when me and my sister, we used to be at home and we are just having fun, we are just like playing, and we hear the sound of that motorcycle approaching the house. We used to know that it's like dad is here, and we used to just stop everything we are doing and we used to take out our books. So that sound in particular was very, like it was very close to me. And like the emotions which I had attached to those sounds, I was like, oh, we need to record this. And like even if not with an intention of selling it, I just want to make sure that it is archived in some way or the other. So that was one of the intentions, and then we went ahead and recorded that. And it's up on the store in Sonus.
Now, you had mentioned in the description that it's a pretty popular motorcycle in India at that time, so it could be used in a lot of older films and things like that because it's been around for a while.
Yeah, that's true. And surprisingly, like we were just checking the dashboard, like just to check the analytics of the sound effects which we have, and that library has been sold the most. Like people are downloading that library the most because it has its own sound. It can't be. You can't say that. Oh, it sounds a little bit like the Harley Davidson, or it sounds a little bit like. It doesn't. Like it has the sound of its own. Like I think it just stands out. Like anyone, I think anyone in Bombay, especially the oldies, like people who are maybe in their late 40s or 50s, they recognize that sound. Like they know the sound. And there was a time when I got the motorcycle made and I was riding it on the street. The amount of people that stopped and they were asking me, "Oh, this is the Rajdoot, right? Like whose bike is this? Like how much did you get it for?" And I used to it used to be an interesting conversation, like just you stopped at the traffic and you're having these conversations about this motorcycle with strangers. Like they just roll down their windows and they ask you about the motorcycle, and most of the time it's these people who are in their late 40s and like early 50s or 60s. So that was a good thing.
That's nice. Now, if you were speaking to somebody who was interested in getting into production sound, what kind of advice would you give them?
If you're migrating from another, say if you're a music recording engineer and then you're moving to production sound field, then I think one of the things which you need to do is get those credits on early on. And every once in a while you'll come across a gig which will be like, oh, you know what, we're not going to pay you, but we'll give you a credit. And I think those are the kind of jobs that people who are just starting out should bag, because I think what it comes up to is the projects that you have worked in the past. You could have done a bad job on it, but yeah, you could say that I've worked on this film, I've worked on these many films. But like now at this point, if I get an inquiry about such job that, oh, we are not going to pay you, but we'll give you a credit, I'll just ask them to just move to the next guy. But I think those are the kind of jobs that people who are just starting out should bag. That okay, they should, like maybe rent out, crack a deal with them in a way where, like maybe the production just pays for the equipment, like and most of the times the production agrees, like, okay, fine, we'll arrange the equipment from our side, but we want you as the recordist. So I think doing a lot of free jobs towards early on in the process, I think it works for me. That's just my way of thinking. As the most, I think that's how Gary V would think about these things. Like do a lot of stuff for free early on, get your foot inside the industry, and then maybe once you have a specific set of skills in your bag, that's when you go do the bigger jobs. That's one thing which I feel is what is necessary. Film school projects, or like approaching students from the films. If you have a local film school around you, and in Bombay there always is, and I'm talking specifically about Bombay, is you can approach them. You could just tell them, because film schools usually have their own equipment. All they need is maybe a recordist. You could help and assist those, because no one is going to hire you on a feature film right off the bat. Like, oh, you're trying to make a transition from this field to that field. No, bro, you need to wait in the line because there are other people in line.
Well, Aditya, as we kind of start to wrap things up, what's the best way for people to reach out and get in touch with you?
Sure. So I have this website called syncandpost.com. That's syncandpost.com. And on Instagram, I am at SyncinPost again. And on my website, actually, there's all the information that you need to get in touch with me. I'm always up for a conversation with anyone, like anything related to sound or films. I'm always up for it. So you can always DM me regarding anything that it is that you want to talk about.
So I just want to say thanks to Aditya Yadav.
Thank you for having me.
And a big thanks to all of our listeners out there. If you'd like us to discuss a particular topic, please send us an email at locationsoundpodcast@gmail.com. We would love for you to subscribe and leave us a comment. We're available on Apple Podcast, and for Android users, check out Google Podcast. Also, we're on Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, remember, sound is half the picture.